Sometimes the smallest notification on your phone can split open everything you thought was steady and safe. I was standing in the kitchen of our home in this quiet, established suburb just outside Sacramento, California, when that family group chat lit up and changed the way I saw my entire marriage. My name is Lauren Bennett. I am 32 years old. For the past 6 years, I had built my marketing consultancy from a single client in our spare bedroom into something that finally felt like it belonged to me. My husband had always said he was proud of that, at least in the beginning. We met at a small networking event downtown when I was still figuring out how to charge what my work was actually worth. He worked at a larger firm across town, and his coworker was the one everyone said had the best connections in the industry. I never imagined those connections would one day be used against me. The Memorial Day reunion was only a week away. My mother, my father, and my sister were all planning to drive in and stay with us for the long weekend. I had spent the last few evenings making the guest rooms ready and thinking maybe this year would feel different. Maybe we could all sit on the back porch and talk without the old tensions rising up. I had always been the one who tried to keep everyone connected, the one who sent the checks when my parents needed help with the roof or when my sister was between jobs again. Giving had become second nature to me, and for a long time I told myself that was just what family meant. That Tuesday evening, the phone on the counter gave a soft chime. The family group chat notification appeared at the top of the screen. I almost ignored it because I was in the middle of updating a client proposal, but the preview text made my stomach drop before I even opened the thread. It showed a message from my husband that had been sent earlier that afternoon, and my sister had replied. The words were right there in the little bubble my husband had written, that I kept making emotional decisions with the business, and that his coworker agreed it was time someone stepped in before I lost the clients we all helped land. I stood very still with the phone in my hand. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake. I tapped it open anyway. The full thread was longer than I expected. My husband had written to my sister privately first, then she had brought it into the group chat so my mother could see. My mother had added a short reply that simply said she agreed and that someone needed to talk sense into me. There was no mention of asking me what I wanted. There was only this quiet, coordinated agreement that my husband and his coworker knew better than I did about the work I had built with my own hands. When my husband walked through the front door an hour later, I was still standing in the same spot. He set his briefcase down and gave me the same calm smile he always did after work. I held the phone out so he could see the thread. For a moment, he just looked at it. Then he sighed, like I was the one who had done something wrong. I was going to tell you tonight, he said. His voice stayed even, almost gentle. His coworker has been watching how scattered you've been with the client calls. He thinks we can stabilize everything if we move the bigger accounts under his management for a while. Your mother and sister already understand why it makes sense. I felt something small and sharp break open inside my chest. You went to them before you came to me, I said. The words came out quieter than I meant them to. You told my own family that I'm too emotional to run my business. He walked past me into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water like we were discussing something ordinary. I told them the truth. You've been carrying too much. Even your mother said she's noticed how overwhelmed you sound lately. She thinks it would be better for everyone if his coworker and I handle the parts that need steady hands. I followed him because I could not make myself stay still. Those clients came to me because of the work I did. Not because of him, not because of you. I built every single relationship in that list. He turned around and looked at me with an expression that was almost kind. And now you're too close to it to see clearly. That's what your sister said too. She's worried about you. We all are. The way he said we all made the room feel smaller. I could picture my mother and sister sitting in their own homes nodding along while he painted me as someone who needed managing. It was not loud or cruel. It was soft and reasonable, the kind of tone that made you doubt your own memory of how things actually happened. We ended up on the back porch after dinner because I could not sit inside anymore. The evening air was still warm, even though the sun had gone down. My husband sat in the chair across from mine and rested his elbows on his knees like he was ready to have a calm adult conversation. I kept my hands folded in my lap because they would not stop shaking. I don't understand why you did this, I said finally. My voice sounded thin in the quiet. We could have talked about the business together. You never once said you thought his coworker should take over anything. He looked out at the dark yard for a long moment before he answered, because every time I tried to bring it up, you got defensive. You always get defensive when anyone suggests you might need help. Your mother noticed it years ago. She told me once that you were the one who gave everything but never let anyone give back. She said it was going to break you eventually. The words landed like small stones. I had spent so many years being the one my mother called when money was tight or when my sister needed another favor. I had never complained out loud. I had simply transferred what I could and told myself it was enough. Now that same pattern was being used to say I was the problem. His coworker already reached out to 2 of the bigger clients this afternoon. My husband continued still in that same steady voice. He framed it as a partnership expansion. They were receptive. If you fight this, it's only going to make things harder for everyone when the family gets here for Memorial Day. I felt the first real crack in the careful wall I had built around my own heart. He was not yelling, he was simply explaining with patience why my business and my family were better off if I stepped back and let him and his coworker decide what happened next. The betrayal was not dramatic. It was quiet and logical and wrapped in concern that did not actually include me. I stood up because sitting still had become impossible. The porch light cast long shadows across the wooden boards between us. I need some air, I said. My voice was steady, even though everything inside me felt like it was tilting. My husband nodded like he had expected that. Take your time. We can talk more in the morning before your mother calls to finalize the weekend plans. I walked down the steps into the yard without looking back. The grass was cool under my bare feet. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor's dog barked once and then went quiet again. I kept walking until I reached the small wooden fence at the edge of our property. My phone was still in my hand. I opened the group chat one more time and read the thread from the beginning, letting every word settle. They had all agreed so easily. My husband, his coworker, my mother, my sister. None of them had asked what I wanted for the work I had built. They had simply decided that my giving had gone on long enough and that it was time someone else took the reins. I stood there in the dark for a long time, feeling the weight of every check I had ever written and every late-night client call I had taken so the business could grow. The night air smelled like cut grass and the faint smoke from someone's barbecue 2 houses over. Memorial Day was supposed to be about remembering what mattered. I wondered what it would feel like to sit at our table with all of them, now knowing they had already chosen sides without me. My phone vibrated again in my hand. This time, it was not the group chat. It was a single message from an unknown number. The text was short and simple. Lauren, it's your aunt. We need to talk before the weekend. There's something you should see. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My aunt had not been in the family group chat for years. She lived 2 hours away and had always kept a polite distance from the rest of us. The message felt like a small door opening in a wall I had not known was there. I did not answer it right away. I slipped the phone into my pocket and looked back at the house, where my husband was probably already getting ready for bed like nothing had changed. The light in our bedroom window glowed soft and ordinary. Everything around me looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but I could feel the ground shifting underneath my feet in a way that no one else seemed to notice yet. I took one slow breath and let it out. The night was quiet. Somewhere inside the house, a floorboard creaked. I stayed where I was a little longer, letting the cool air settle against my skin before I finally turned and walked back toward the porch steps. The next morning, my husband left for work without mentioning the group chat again. He kissed my forehead the way he always did and said he would be home early so we could finish preparing for the reunion. His voice was still calm, still reasonable. I stood at the window and watched his car pull away. Then I opened my laptop and tried to reach 2 of my oldest clients myself. Both of them answered, but their tones had changed. One of them said his coworker had already called and explained that my husband was helping stabilize things for me. The other one sounded almost apologetic when he told me he had agreed to move his account over just for now. I closed the laptop without replying to either of them. My hands felt cold against the wooden table. By midday, my mother had called twice. I let the first call go to voicemail, but the second time I answered, because I could not keep pretending the silence was normal. She sounded tired and a little sad, the way she always did when she thought she was being the reasonable one. Your husband is only trying to help, she said, after a short pause. He and his coworker have more experience with the bigger accounts. Your sister and I both think it would take some of the pressure off you before everyone gets here this weekend. I sat on the edge of the couch with the phone pressed to my ear. Did he tell you that I built those accounts from nothing? Did he tell you that I was the one who stayed up until 3 a.m. writing proposals when no one else believed the business would work? She let out a small sigh. He said, you would see it that way. He said, you have always been the one who gives everything but never let anyone give back. We do appreciate it, honey. We just think it might be time for you to let someone else carry some of the weight. The words landed softly, but they still hurt. I ended the call without raising my voice. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time staring at the blank screen. My mother had never been cruel. She had simply decided the same way my husband had decided that my giving had gone far enough and that it was now time for me to step aside. That afternoon, I drove to a small coffee shop 2 neighborhoods over because I could not stay inside our house any longer. I needed space to think. While I was sitting at a corner table, my phone rang again. This time it was my aunt. Her voice was quiet but steady when she asked if I could meet her that evening at a park near her route into town. I have something I need to show you before the weekend, she said. It's better if we talk in person. I agreed without asking for details. Something in her tone told me this was not another conversation about how I needed to listen to my husband. We met at a small park with a playground that was already emptying as the evening cooled. My aunt was waiting on a bench near the edge of the grass. She looked older than I remembered, but her eyes were clear. She did not hug me the way some family members would. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small faded envelope. This was in a box of old things your grandmother left me years ago, she said. I found it again last week when I was cleaning out the attic. I almost threw it away, but then I saw the date on the back and I thought you should see it before everyone gathers at your house. She handed me the envelope. Inside was an old photograph, the kind with slightly curled edges and colors that had faded into soft pastels. It showed me at maybe 10 years old standing between my mother and father at some long ago family picnic. My sister was a toddler in my mother's arms. Everyone was smiling at the camera except me. I was looking off to the side, my small hand gripping the edge of my mother's dress, like I was afraid she might walk away. On the back of the photograph, written in my mother's handwriting from more than 20 years ago, were 3 short lines. Lauren already gives too much. She thinks if she keeps giving, we will finally see her. I worry someone will take advantage of that one day. I read the words twice. My hands felt unsteady around the fragile paper. My aunt sat quietly beside me and let the silence stretch. She wrote that after your father lost his job that year, my aunt said finally, your mother was scared, and she was already leaning on you to help with your sister. She saw the pattern even then, but she never stopped the pattern. She just wrote it down and put it away. I kept staring at the photograph. The little girl in the picture looked so certain that if she just held on tighter, everything would stay okay. I had spent the years since then proving her right. I had given money, time, attention, and forgiveness without ever asking whether anyone was giving anything back. My husband had seen that same pattern and used it. He had gone to my mother and my sister first because he knew they would recognize the old story and agree that I was the one who needed to be managed. My aunt touched my arm lightly. I'm not telling you what to do with this. I just thought you should know that the story your husband is telling them is not new. It is the same story your mother has been telling herself for decades. I slipped the photograph back into the envelope and held it in my lap. The park was almost empty now. A few parents were calling their children in from the swings. The light was turning the color of late evening soft and gold against the trees. When I got home, my husband was already in the kitchen making dinner like it was any other night. He asked how my day had been, and I told him it had been quiet. He did not ask about my aunt. I wondered if he even knew she had reached out. Later, after we had eaten and the dishes were done, he suggested we sit on the porch again. The air was cooler than the night before. He took the same chair he had used the evening before and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. His coworker secured another client transfer this afternoon, he said. His voice was still calm, still measured, the one with the software account. He said they were relieved to have someone more organized handling their campaign. I think it would be easier for everyone if you signed the paperwork tomorrow so we can make the transition official before your family arrives. I looked at him across the small space between our chairs. The envelope with the old photograph was still in my bag beside me, but I did not pull it out. I was not ready to show him yet. I was not even sure I wanted to show anyone yet. What happens if I do not sign it? I asked. He was quiet for a moment, then he answered in the same steady tone. Then the reunion this weekend is going to be very uncomfortable for all of us. Your mother and sister have already made it clear they think this is the right step. Your father will probably say the same thing once he hears the full story. It would be better if we presented a united front when everyone gets here. I felt the weight of his words settle over the porch. He was not threatening me with anger. He was simply laying out the consequences as if they were facts I could not change. If I fought, the family gathering that was supposed to bring us closer would instead become another place where I was the problem. If I gave in, I would lose the business I had built, and the last piece of myself that still felt like it belonged only to me. I stood up and walked to the railing. The yard was dark now, but I could still make out the shape of the small fence at the edge of the property. Somewhere down the street, a porch light flicked on and then off again. I kept my back to my husband because I did not want him to see the expression on my face. I need to think, I said. He did not argue. He simply nodded and said he would be inside if I wanted to talk more. The screen door closed behind him with a soft click. I stayed on the porch for a long time. After that, the envelope with the old photograph pressed against my side like a small secret weight. The Memorial Day weekend was only a few days away now. My mother had already texted to ask what time everyone should arrive on Friday. My sister had sent a message in the group chat saying she was looking forward to finally getting everything sorted out as a family. My husband had not pushed me again about the paperwork, but I could feel the quiet pressure building every time he looked at me across the table or asked if I had checked my email. I pulled the photograph out of the envelope one more time and held it under the porch light. The little girl in the picture was still gripping the edge of her mother's dress. I wondered what she would think if she could see the woman she had become still standing on a porch in the dark, still trying to decide how much more she was willing to give before there was nothing left of her own. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was another message from my aunt. This one was shorter than the first. Whatever you decide, you do not have to decide it alone. Call me if you need to talk before they all get there. I read it twice and then slipped the phone back into my pocket without answering. The night air felt cooler against my skin. I stayed on the porch a little longer, letting the quiet settle around me before I finally turned and went inside. I stayed on the porch until the night air turned cool enough to raise goosebumps on my arms. My aunt's message sat unread in my pocket for a long time. When I finally went inside, my husband was already asleep. I lay awake beside him and kept seeing the faded photograph in my mind. The little girl gripping her mother's dress had grown into a woman who still believed that if she just gave enough, the people she loved would finally see her clearly. That belief had kept me silent for years. It had also made me easy to manage. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended quiet. My husband did not push me again about signing anything. He simply left the paperwork on the kitchen table each morning and removed it each evening without comment. My mother called once more to confirm arrival times for Friday. My sister sent a text saying she was bringing a cake and that she hoped we could all be on the same page by the time everyone sat down together. I answered them both with short, polite replies and then turned my phone face down. The old photograph stayed in my bag. I did not show it to anyone yet. On Friday afternoon, the house filled with the sound of car doors and rolling suitcases. My mother arrived first, followed by my father and then my sister. They hugged me at the door the way they always did, but the hugs felt careful, like everyone was already bracing for the conversation they believed needed to happen. My husband welcomed them with the same steady warmth he had shown me for years. He carried bags upstairs and asked about the drive. He looked like the reasonable son-in-law any family would want. I watched him and felt the distance between us widen with every ordinary gesture. That evening we sat around the dining table with the food I had prepared earlier. My mother complimented the roast. My sister talked about a new job she was hoping to start. My father asked my husband about work. The conversation stayed light until my mother set her fork down and looked at me across the table. Your husband told us about the business, she said gently. We all think it's the right thing. His coworker seems very capable, and you've been carrying so much on your own. My sister nodded. You've always been the one who fixes everything for everyone else. Maybe it's time someone fixes something for you. My father added in his quiet way that he agreed. The words were kind on the surface. They landed like small, heavy stones anyway. I felt every year I had spent sending money, answering late-night calls, and rearranging my own life so theirs could stay steady. Now that same history was being used to explain why I should hand over the one thing that had ever truly been mine. I reached into my bag and took out the envelope. I placed the old photograph in the center of the table where everyone could see it. My mother's handwriting on the back was still clear under the dining room light. I found this, I said. My voice was soft, but it did not shake. My aunt gave it to me. You wrote it when I was 10, Mom. You already knew I gave too much. You were afraid someone would take advantage of it. The table went quiet. My mother stared at the photograph. For a moment, her face softened with something that looked like old sadness. Then my husband spoke, still calm, still reasonable. That was a long time ago, he said. Things are different now. We're trying to protect you from making decisions you'll regret later. My sister reached for the photo and turned it over. She read the words out loud, once then set it back down without looking at me. That doesn't change what's happening with the client, she said. His coworker already has everything moving forward. If you fight this, you're only going to make it harder on all of us. I looked around the table at the faces I had spent years trying to keep happy. My mother's eyes were tired. My father's mouth was set in the same line it always took when he wanted a difficult conversation to end. My sister was already reaching for her phone like the subject was closed. My husband watched me with the patient expression of someone who knew he had already won. I stood up slowly. The chair legs scraped against the floor. I'm not signing anything, I said. The words came out quieter than I expected, but they were clear. I'm not giving the business to his coworker or to you, and I'm not staying here while you all decide what's best for me. My mother's face crumpled a little. Please don't do this right now, not in front of everyone. My husband's voice stayed even. If you leave the house and the business stay with me, you know that. You'll be walking away from everything we built together. I met his eyes. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel small. I know I said, that's the choice I'm making. No one tried to stop me when I walked upstairs and packed one suitcase. My mother cried softly at the table. My sister kept saying this was exactly the kind of emotional decision everyone had been worried about. My father stayed silent. My husband followed me to the bedroom door, but did not come inside. He stood in the hallway with his hands in his pockets and watched me zip the bag. You're really doing this, he said. It was not a question. I am, I answered. I gave for a long time because I thought it would make me worth staying for. It didn't. I'm done giving pieces of myself so other people can feel steady. He did not argue. He simply stepped aside when I walked past him with the suitcase. Downstairs, my mother tried to stand up, but my sister gently pulled her back into the chair. No one followed me to the door. Our neighbor, Sophia, offered a quiet nod of understanding as she helped me load the suitcase into the car. I drove to a small motel on the edge of town that night. The room was plain and quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed with the old photograph in my hands and let myself cry for the first time in days. The tears were not loud. They were the kind that come when something long and heavy finally lets go. My aunt arrived the next morning with coffee and a spare key to her guest room. She did not ask me to explain. She simply sat with me while I made the calls I needed to make. I contacted a lawyer about separating my personal accounts from the business. I let the remaining clients know I was stepping away and that they could follow his coworker if they chose. I did not fight for any of it. The cost of staying would have been higher than the cost of leaving. Over the next weeks, I moved into a small apartment a few miles from my aunt's house. The space was modest. There was no dining table big enough for family gatherings. There was only a small desk where I started taking on freelance work again, one client at a time on my own terms. My mother called twice. Both times I answered and listened while she cried and asked me to come back so we could fix this as a family. I told her I loved her, but I would not be returning to the version of myself who believed love required me to disappear. My sister sent one long text filled with disappointment. I read it once and did not reply. My father never called. My husband sent the divorce papers through his lawyer 3 months later. He kept the house and the portion of the business his coworker had already moved under his control. I signed without negotiation. The day the papers were final, I sat on the small balcony of my new apartment and watched the evening light move across the rooftops of the neighborhood. The quiet felt different than the quiet on our old porch. It did not feel like waiting, it felt like room. A year has passed since that Memorial Day weekend. I still live in the small apartment. My freelance work has grown slowly, the way things grow when they are built without anyone else deciding the pace. I see my aunt often. Sometimes we sit at her kitchen table, and she tells me stories about my grandmother that my mother never shared. I have not spoken to my husband since the day I left. I have not spoken to my mother or sister in months. The silence is not angry anymore. It is simply the space I needed in order to hear my own voice again. There are still days when the old habit of giving rises up and tries to convince me that I should reach out, that maybe this time they will see me without requiring me to shrink. On those days, I take the faded photograph out of the drawer where I keep it and read my mother's handwriting on the back. Then I put it away and go back to the work that belongs only to me. My worth was never in how much I could carry for other people. It was in the quiet decision to stop carrying what was never mine to hold in the first place. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story stayed with you, drop peace in the comments if you chose yourself even when it meant letting go.